February 13th, 1945, 7:43 in the evening. The smell hit me first, my mother's potato soup, thin as dishwater but warm enough to fill the hollow in my stomach. I was 12 years old, and I hadn't tasted real meat in 18 months. The kitchen window was cracked open despite the cold, letting in the sound of Frau Weber's radio from across the courtyard. Some opera I didn't recognize. The notes drifted through Dresden's Altstadt like smoke, weaving between buildings that had stood for 300 years. My name is Greta Hoffman. I lived on Pragerstrasse, 3rd floor, in an apartment that smelled like old books and my father's pipe tobacco, though father had been gone since Stalingrad, and mother had hidden the tobacco tin 2 years ago, unable to bear the scent without him. I was sitting at our dining table, running my finger along a crack in the wood grain, when mother called from the kitchen. "Greta, set the table properly. We're not animals." I placed the mismatched plates carefully. One was porcelain from my grandmother's wedding set. The other two were tin replacements after the china cabinet shattered during an air raid drill last autumn. Not a real raid, just practice. Dresden hadn't been bombed. Not once. Some people said we were lucky. Others said the British had promised to spare us because of the art, the museums, the Frauenkirche, with its stone dome that caught the sunset and turned gold. My little brother, Klaus, was under the piano again. He was 6, small for his age, with hair so blonde it looked white in certain light. The piano was his favorite hiding place, a massive Bechstein Grand that had belonged to my grandfather. Klaus would crawl underneath and lie on his back, staring up at the strings and hammers, humming songs he made up in his head. "Klaus, come eat," mother said, wiping her hands on her apron. Her voice was soft, but there was an edge beneath it. The edge had been there since the letter came about, father. "Not hungry," Klaus called back, his voice muffled by the piano's shadow. I walked over and crouched down. His eyes were closed, his hands folded on his chest like he was already in a coffin. I hated when he did that. "You look dead," I told him. "I'm practicing." "For what?" He didn't answer. He just hummed a low, strange melody that made the hairs on my arms stand up. Mother served the soup in silence. The radio across the courtyard changed stations. Now it was news. A man's voice, clipped and efficient, talking about the Eastern Front. The Soviets were closing in. Everyone knew it. You could feel it in the air, in the way people looked at each other on the street, in the lines at the ration office. I sat down and picked up my spoon. The soup was mostly water and cabbage, with a single shriveled potato floating in the center like a drowned moon. That's when the sirens started. At first, I thought it was another drill. We'd had 3 in the past month. Mother stood frozen by the stove, her ladle still in her hand, soup dripping onto the floor. Klaus sat up so fast he cracked his head on the underside of the piano. "Downstairs," Mother said. Her voice was calm, but her hands were shaking. "Now, it's just practice," I said, but even as I spoke, I knew it wasn't. The sirens were different this time, louder, longer. They didn't stop to breathe. Klaus crawled out from under the piano, clutching the side of his head. Mother grabbed her coat, the heavy wool one with the missing button, and shoved our arms into our sleeves. She didn't bother with the soup. She didn't turn off the stove. She just grabbed Klaus's hand and mine and pulled us toward the door. The stairwell was already crowded. Frau Weber from across the hall, still wearing her housecoat. Herr Bachmann from the 2nd floor, his cane clattering against the steps. A young woman I didn't recognize, holding a baby wrapped in a blanket that looked too thin for February. Everyone was moving down, 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 toward the cellar. The sirens screamed. Klaus was crying. I wasn't. I don't know why. Maybe because I was 12 and thought that made me grown. Maybe because some part of me still believed Dresden was safe, that the bombs would fall somewhere else, that the stone and porcelain city where I'd spent my entire life was too beautiful to burn. We reached the cellar just as the first explosion hit. The cellar smelled like mildew and fear. 40, maybe 50 people packed into a space meant for storage, old furniture, crates of preserves, Boxes of things no one had looked at in years. Someone had set up benches along the walls. A single oil lamp hung from a hook in the ceiling, casting shadows that moved like living things. Mother pulled Klaus and me into a corner near a stack of paint cans. She sat between us, one arm around each of our shoulders. Her breathing was fast and shallow. I could feel her heartbeat through her coat. The ceiling shook. Dust rained down from the beams. Frau Weber was praying, her lips moving silently, her fingers working over rosary beads that clicked like insects. Herr Bachmann sat with his head in his hands. The young woman with the baby was rocking back and forth, humming something that might have been a lullaby. "It's far away," someone said. A man's voice. I couldn't see who. "It's not here. They're hitting the rail yard." Another explosion. Closer. The lamp swung on its hook, throwing wild shadows. Klaus buried his face in Mother's side. I kept my eyes open. I wanted to see. I needed to see. The bombs fell in waves. You could hear them coming, a whistle that started high and dropped low, like a scream sliding down a scale. Then impact. A sound so loud it stopped being sound and became pressure, a fist squeezing your skull from the inside. The walls vibrated, the floor jumped. A crack appeared in the ceiling, thin as a hair, running from corner to corner. Time stopped making sense. Minutes felt like hours. Hours collapsed into seconds. I counted the explosions. 1, 2, 3, 4. I lost count at 17, or maybe it was 70. I don't know anymore. Between the bombs, there was silence. Terrible, ringing silence. That's when you heard the other sounds. Crying, praying. The creak of the building is settling. The baby had stopped making noise. I looked at the young woman. She was still rocking, still humming, but her eyes were empty. "When will it stop?" Klaus whispered. Mother didn't answer. She just held us tighter. Then, for a moment, it did stop. The whistling faded. The explosions grew distant. Someone laughed, a short, jagged sound. Herr Bachmann lifted his head. "It's over," he said. "Thank God, it's over." But it wasn't. The second wave came 20 minutes later. We'd started to relax. Some people were standing, stretching cramped legs, talking in low voices about what we'd do when we went back upstairs. Mother was smoothing Klaus's hair, whispering something I couldn't hear. I was staring at the crack in the ceiling, watching it, wondering if it would grow. Then, the sirens again. Different this time, shorter bursts, a frantic rhythm, and then the whistling started before anyone could move, before anyone could scream. The first bomb hit so close the lamp fell from its hook. Glass shattered. Darkness swallowed us whole. Someone was screaming. Maybe it was me. The explosions came faster now, one on top of the other, a drumbeat from hell. The walls shook so hard I thought they'd collapse inward and crush us into paste. Mother was pulling us down to the floor, covering us with her body. I could feel her ribs pressing against my back. Klaus was underneath her, underneath me, his hand gripping my wrist so tight it hurt. The ceiling groaned. The crack widened. Plaster fell like snow. I tasted dust and blood. I'd bitten my tongue without realizing it. The noise was everything. It was inside my head, inside my chest, vibrating in my bones. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. I could only exist in the space between one explosion and the next, waiting for the one that would finally bring the building down on top of us. And then I heard it, a different sound. Beneath the bombs, beneath the screaming, beneath the roar of collapsing stone, Klaus was humming. That same strange melody from before. Quiet, almost inaudible. But I could hear it because my ear was pressed against his back, and I could feel the vibration of it through his ribs. He was humming under the piano. In his mind, he was back home. Safe. In his hiding place. And somehow, impossibly, that made the terror just bearable enough to survive. The bombing stopped at 10:36. I know because Herr Bachmann's pocket watch had cracked but was still ticking, and he held it up to the dim light someone had managed to create with a match. We sat in silence. No one moved. No one spoke. We were waiting for the third wave, for the sky to tear open again, for the end, but it didn't come. Not then. What came instead was heat. At first, I thought it was my imagination. The cellar had been cold when we'd run down February cold, the kind that makes your breath visible. But now, slowly, the temperature was rising. Not warmth, heat. The kind that makes sweat bead on your forehead even when you're not moving. "We need to go up," someone said. A man I didn't recognize. "We need to see." "It's not safe," Frau Weber said. "What if they come back?" "Stay here then. I'm going." He pushed past us toward the stairs. Others followed. Mother stood, pulling Klaus and me with her. We joined the line of people climbing back toward the world above. The stairwell was hotter than the cellar. Each step up, the heat increased. By the time we reached the second floor, it was like climbing into an oven. The walls were warm to the touch. Paint was bubbling on the door frames. We reached the third floor. Our floor. Mother pushed open the door to our apartment. The window was gone. Not broken. Gone. Melted. The frames sagged like soft wax. Through the opening, I could see the city. Dresden was burning. Not burning. Burning was too small a word. The city was being consumed. Buildings I'd known my entire life were torches. The Frauenkirche's dome glowed like a second sun. Flames reached hundreds of feet into the air, twisting together into columns of fire that seemed to hold up the sky. The heat was so intense I could feel it from our apartment, 50 meters from the nearest fire. And the sound. A roar. A living, breathing roar that drowned out everything else. The wind was wrong. It wasn't blowing. It was being sucked, pulled toward the fires. I watched papers and debris fly past our window, drawn toward the inferno like metal to a magnet. "We can't stay here," Mother said. Her voice was flat. Empty. "We have to go." "Where?" I asked. She didn't answer. There was nowhere. The streets were rivers of fire. The bridges were burning. The parks where children played were forests of flame. Klaus tugged on my sleeve. "The piano," he said. "What?" "The piano. I want to hide under the piano." I looked at Mother. She looked at the piano. It stood in the corner, untouched, impossible, and solid in a world that was melting. "We can't fit under there," I said. "Yes, we can," Klaus insisted. "We can all fit. Please." Mother stared at him. Then she stared at the window, at the city eating itself alive. She made a sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been something breaking inside her. "All right," she said. Under the piano. We dragged blankets and coats from the bedroom. Mother grabbed the last tin of water from the kitchen. She didn't bother with food. What was the point? We arranged everything in a nest beneath Bechstein's belly. Klaus crawled in first, then me, then Mother. We lay on our sides, pressed together, staring out at the burning city through the absent window. The heat grew worse. The air tasted like ash and chemicals. My eyes burned. My throat felt scraped raw. But under the piano, in Klaus's hiding place, there was something that felt like protection. Stupid, impossible, but real. The fires burned all night. I watched buildings collapse. I watched the sky turn red, then orange, then white. I watched shadows move through the streets below, people running, stumbling, falling. I watched a woman carrying a child stop in the middle of Pragerstrasse, set the child down gently, and then lie down beside it, and not move again. Mother covered Klaus's eyes. But she let me watch. Maybe she knew I needed to see. Maybe she was too tired to stop me. Or maybe she understood that this was the moment my childhood ended, and there was no point in pretending otherwise. Klaus hummed his melody. Mother stroked his hair. I counted my heartbeats. 100, 200. I lost count. I started over. The numbers meant nothing, but they gave me something to hold on to when everything else was falling apart. At some point, I slept. Not real sleep, something closer to shutting down. When I opened my eyes again, the light had changed. Dawn, gray and sick. The fires were still burning, but they'd lost their fury. Now they were just eating, methodical, patient, reducing stone and wood and memory to ash. "Mama," Klaus said. His voice was small. "I'm thirsty." Mother opened the tin of water. She let him drink first, then me, then took a sip herself. There was maybe a quarter left. She closed the tin and set it beside us. "We'll wait until it's safe," she said. But I knew the truth. I could see it in her eyes. There was no safe. Not anymore. Dresden, our beautiful stone and porcelain city, was gone. And we were alive under a piano, in an apartment that should have collapsed, on a floor that should have burned. We were alive, and that was either a miracle or a curse. We stayed under the piano for 2 days. No one came for us. No soldiers, no rescue workers, no neighbors. The building around us creaked and settled. Somewhere below, a pipe burst, and we could hear water rushing. But our floor held. The piano held. We held. On the morning of the 3rd day, the fires had burned themselves out. The city was silent. A silence so complete it hurt worse than the bombs. No birds, no voices, no church bells. Just wind moving through empty streets, carrying ash. Mother crawled out first. She stood slowly, her joints popping, and walked to the window. I followed. Klaus stayed under the piano. The city was gone. Not damaged, not destroyed, gone. Where buildings had stood were hills of rubble. Where streets had run were canyons of debris. The Frauenkirche's dome had collapsed inward. The opera house was a skeleton. I couldn't recognize anything. The geography of my entire life had been erased. And the bodies, they were everywhere. In the streets, in the ruins. Some burned beyond recognition. Others looked like they were sleeping. The firestorm had sucked the oxygen from their lungs, killed them without touching them. I saw a woman sitting upright against a wall, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes open. I saw a dog standing over its owner, refusing to leave. I saw children. I turned away. Mother pulled me against her chest. She was shaking. "We have to leave," she said. "We can't stay here." "Where will we go?" "Where will we go?" "West, away from the Russians, toward the Americans." "How far?" "I don't know. As far as we can." Klaus crawled out from under the piano. He stood beside us, looking out at the ruins. His face was blank. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He just stared, his small hand finding mine. We packed what we could carry. Blankets. The tin of water. A few pieces of bread we found in the cupboard, somehow untouched. Mother wrapped Father's tobacco tin in a handkerchief and put it in her pocket. She didn't explain why. She didn't need to. We left the apartment. The stairs were intact, though the walls were charred black. We passed doors hanging open, apartments gutted by fire. We passed bodies. We didn't stop. Outside, the air was thick with ash. It coated everything. Our clothes, our skin, our lungs. Each breath was like swallowing death. We walked north, toward the Elbe. Mother said the bridges might still be standing. If we could cross the river, we'd have a chance. The streets were full of survivors, gray ghosts moving through gray ruins. No one spoke. No one looked at each other. We were all too busy trying to understand how to continue existing in a world that had ended. We walked for hours, maybe days. Time had stopped working properly. Klaus didn't complain. He just held my hand and walked. His humming had stopped. I missed it. The silence was worse. We reached the river at sunset. The bridges were gone, all of them, collapsed into the water or burned to stumps. But people had found a way. Someone had lashed together boats and boards to make a crude crossing. Soldiers were directing people. American soldiers. They'd arrived faster than anyone expected. A young soldier with red hair helped Mother onto the raft. He spoke German with an accent. "You're safe now," he said. Mother laughed. A terrible sound. Safe. He didn't understand. How could he? Safety was a word from before. It didn't exist anymore. We crossed the river as the sun went down. On the other side there were tents, food, water, people in clean uniforms who looked at us like we were ghosts. Maybe we were. They gave us soup. Real soup, with meat. Klaus ate 3 bowls. Mother couldn't finish one. I sat between them and stared at the fire they'd built for warmth. It was small and controlled, nothing like the fires that had eaten our city, but I couldn't look at it without seeing everything burn again. That night, we slept in a tent with 50 other refugees. Klaus crawled against me and whispered, "I wish we were under the piano." "Me too," I said, and I meant it. 79 years have passed since that night. I'm 91 now. I live in a small apartment in Munich. No piano. I can't have one in the room. The sight of it makes my hands shake. Klaus died in 1973. Heart attack. He was only 34. But I think part of him died under that piano, in that apartment, in that burning city. He never married. Never had children. He worked in a factory, came home to a quiet apartment, and hummed to himself in the dark. Mother lived until 86. She never spoke about Dresden. Not once. I tried to ask her years later why she'd agreed to hide under the piano. She just shook her head and walked away. Some questions don't have answers. Some things can't be explained. The Bechstein piano survived. After the fires died, after we'd fled, someone found it in the ruins of our building and hauled it away. I don't know who. I don't know where it ended up. But I like to think it's somewhere, still holding its shape, still keeping that small hollow space beneath it where 3 people survived the impossible. Dresden was rebuilt. They reconstructed the Frauenkirche, stone by stone, using pieces from the rubble. It looks almost the same. But it's not. You can see the black stones among the white scars that can't be hidden. The city learned to live with them. So did we. People ask me sometimes, usually young people who didn't live through the war, why I tell this story. They say it's too painful. They say I should let it go. They say dwelling on the past doesn't help anyone. But I tell them this. Memory is the only thing that survives everything. The bombs can destroy buildings. Fire can erase streets. Time can take away everyone who was there. But memory remains. And as long as someone remembers, the people who died weren't erased. They're still here. In the words, in the stories, in the act of speaking their names into the silence. My name is Greta Hoffman. I survived the firebombing of Dresden by hiding under a piano with my mother and my brother. We were 3 people out of 25,000 who died that night. Maybe more. The numbers are still debated, but numbers don't tell the truth. They can't capture the sound of a city screaming. They can't preserve the smell of ash and smoke that stayed in my clothes for months. They can't explain why a 6-year-old boy thought a piano could save his family, and somehow, impossibly, he was right. I'm telling you this now because the people who remember are dying. Soon, we'll all be gone. And Dresden will just be history. Dates and numbers and sanitized paragraphs in textbooks. But it was real. We were real. And the piano was real. And Klaus's melody, that strange, wordless song he hummed in the darkness. I still hear it sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet and I'm alone with my thoughts. I never learned what it meant. I never asked. But I think it was his way of building a world inside his head where none of this had happened, where Father was still alive, where the city still stood, where we were still whole. I think that's what we all do, in our own way. We build pianos in our minds and hide beneath them when the sky starts to fall. And sometimes, if we're lucky, they hold.